Now, the Volkswagen Tiguan Allspace is a car we've already reviewed at launch. And so if you'd want to see what the Tiguan Allspace Elegance and R-Line is like, well, the video is already out. Now, Volkswagen surprised us by introducing the Life, which is an entry-level variant for the Tiguan range. Sitting below the Elegance while still running the same 1.4 TSI, Volkswagen says that this is an amalgamation of using only the parts and offering the features that people want and nothing more. So, is the new Tiguan Allspace price leader a bit cheap? Or did Volkswagen nail it just right and offer exactly what people want? Well, in this review we'll find out, but before we do so, be sure to hit subscribe and hit the bell so you're notified every time we make a new upload. But ladies and gentlemen, this is the review of the 2023 Volkswagen Tiguan Allspace Life. Now, from the outside, you'd be hard-pressed to tell that this is the price leader within the Tiguan Allspace lineup because on the surface, there are very few visual changes. You still get the same full LED IQ light system up front with automatic high beam as well as scrolling indicators and the light bar for the positioning lights. You still get chrome on the front, you still get the same bumper as on the Elegance as well, although the eagle-eyed among you may have spotted the fact that there is now more unpainted black plastic about the place in order to set it apart. And down the side, it's much the same case because you get the same 18-inch alloy wheels that you get on the Tiguan Allspace Elegance wrapped in the same Pirelli Scorpion Verde tires. You also still get the same silver covers over the wing mirrors and you still get the chrome Allspace badging up here on the door. You also still get functional roof rails and you still get tint. So overall, this looks very, very similar. But the back is where I feel that you might start to notice because the unpainted black plastic seems a little bit more prominent back here, especially with the unpainted fake pseudo exhaust exits that you see on this car. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm not a fan of the fake exhaust exits, but the unpainted black plastic is fine because this is ultimately an SUV. The other area where they haven't cheaped out is the tailgate because it's still powered, but you don't get the kick to open function that the slightly flashier variants get. Now, because this is the Tiguan Allspace, it means you still get 7 seats. Now, the last row has been folded down at the moment, and as you can see, all of our luggage and all of our equipment fits within the luggage space behind the rear seats. Now, bear in mind, this is not a particularly large space, so if you do have 7 passengers in the car, you are going to struggle to put 7 passengers worth of crap in the boot. However, if you treat this as a 5+2, then you do have an enormous amount of space within. This boot floor also is reversible because on one hand it can either be raised to so it's a nice flat loading bay, or you can have it ducked in the way we have here in order to keep all of our stuff nicely out of the way. And inside, again, it's much the same case, although perhaps the cost cutting is a little bit more obvious here. Because for starters, you don't get powered seats in the front, not even for the driver, and they are now covered in cloth instead of leather. Now, actually, it's not that bad because this is very high quality cloth. It's quite soft and there's this nice ribbing effect to it, and you still get a sort of quilted thatch pattern all the way up here, so it doesn't feel like it's been made on the cheap. And the same thing could be said of this cabin because again, there hasn't been any real sacrifice in terms of material quality or in terms of build quality. The only thing that I can find is this car doesn't have an ambient lighting system, so all of the trim panels that you see on the door are just that. It's just trim, there's no lights. But that's hardly a big deal because ultimately what matters is what you interact with. And to that end, you still get a full digital instrument cluster, which I think is pretty usable, and you can get the map displayed here and stuff like that. So it all remains very functional, and you still get the full touchscreen infotainment system replete with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which again completes the package in here because again, you're offering exactly what you need and nothing more. You still get triple zone climate control, which is rather nice, which means you get 2 zones up here and then 1 zone for the rear, which is actually controllable from the back, although you can also do it from here. And in terms of practicality, the Tiguan Life doesn't skimp. You get 2 deployable cup holders here, you get enormous door bins which are large enough to even fit the largest water bottles. You still get so many sunglasses holders in here, perfect for someone like me, because actually I only travel with 1 but I own 4, and I promise they close the first time round. And as far as I'm concerned, there's always somewhere to put your tat. Even up here, for example, you can hide a smart tag, although there's also another place to hide your smart tag down here should you so want to. And over here you've got your buttons for the parking sensors and your electric parking brake. And again, it is a matter of having everything that you need. And one of the things I really appreciate about this car is the fact that you get a nice leather-wrapped steering wheel with paddle shifters and actual buttons. Because Volkswagen has this thing about using capacitive touch buttons up here, and I love the fact these are actual clicky buttons that I can feel with my fingers and use when I drive, which I like. And the niceties continue in the back because I still get an absolute ton of legroom, a ton of headroom, and these seats are reclinable. They are 40-20-40 foldable. You get ISOFIX mounts on the outer seats, and you even get cup holders in here, big bottle bins, lots of pockets to store random items, and as I mentioned earlier, you get air conditioning vents with your own climate control, a USB-C port, as well as a 12-volt socket for you to charge even more items. I mean, this is a really good family car. And of course, if you do need to use the third row, because obviously you can't simply do that, you can move the seat bases all the way here, should you so want to. And even here, I still have a decent amount of knee room, and I can tuck my feet in underneath the seat in front of me, which means even sat here, it's genuinely not uncomfortable. And that leaves a generous amount of room in the back, although the third row is mounted very, very low, which means your knees as an adult will be basically around your ears. Now, I've said this before and I will say it again. The third row in the Volkswagen Tiguan Allspace should only be used by children, or if it has to be used by adults, only for short distances, because in addition to it being rather uncomfortable, you also do not get third row aircon vents, which means that it may get a little bit uncomfortable back there in terms of heat as well as in terms of seating position. But if you treat this as a 5+2 with occasional use only in mind for the third row, then you should be just fine. I mean, again, look at this legroom. But the niceties of this car may stop here, because that 1.4 litre engine, well, Now, the purpose of the Tiguan Life is to provide utility and practicality for a slightly more affordable price. Now, one area where they didn't cheap out is the powertrain. So this 1.4 litre is shared with the Tiguan Elegance, and we know that it's a relatively smooth performer with very good fuel economy, and that definitely continues here. Now, although it's paired to a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic, even in town, this transmission is surprisingly smooth. And it does mean that low-speed maneuvers and so on can be maneuvered about with relative ease. And that is also aided by the fact this car has a very, very light steering wheel, which means that driving around in town works quite well. That said though, when the speeds do pick up and you find yourself on a motorway, the steering wheel in this car weights up very nicely and very naturally indeed. And as a result, it does mean that you can make decent progress in this car quite confidently. Now, on a good motorway run, at a steady, stable pace, you can get really good fuel economy in this car, which means that if you load this car up with 5 people, or in fact the full 7 without luggage, you can get really good fuel economy. It's a great touring machine, especially given the fact these 18-inch alloy wheels, although they look relatively small on the outside, are wrapped in really thick tires, which means that going about your business, you can go and drive anywhere and not worry about potholes or denting the wheels or whatever. It's really nice, and it's quite liberating to drive a car that you know will be fine. Now, it's not all roses and bright sunlight in this car, however. Now, I mentioned the sunlight. This car comes as standard with tint, which I'm very, very grateful for. However, there are a few areas where this car falls a little bit short. So for starters, you don't get blind spot monitoring. which I think in a car that's going to be used in town is sort of a necessity at this point, particularly given the prevalence and irritation that bikers tend to provide. And that leads me on to the fact that this car's only active safety feature is lane keep. And even that, it's sort of like a lane departure warning system. It's not like an active lane keep system. And there's nothing else. You don't get AEB, you don't get adaptive cruise control, you don't get blind spot monitoring, as I mentioned earlier, no rear cross traffic alert, nothing. This car is very, very bare bones in that sense. Now, if it is any consolation, it is that bare bones even in the higher end models. So it's not like you're being shortchanged because it's the Tiguan Life. No, VPCM shortchanges everyone equally. Now, this is a bit of a sore point for me because as a family car, I would expect more in the way of safety. If you have these sort of emissions in a sports car, that's one thing. But to have it in a family car, a vehicle that will be used primarily for carting people about, bringing kids to school, going to and from work, and also for family excursions on the weekends, I would want my family car to be safer. And so the lack of active safety features in this car is more than an irritation. It is a genuine problem. And it's made worse by the fact that those sort of active safety features are now available in cars as affordable as the Proto Axia, which means there is even less reason for these systems to not be available in a 170,000 Tiguan. However, as I have been told many, many times by many, many Volkswagen fans, many of whom I suspect don't even own a Tiguan or have a family, VW buyers don't care. What they care about is the way it drives and the refinement and the smoothness of the engine and the performance on offer. And if that is the case, then yes, the Tiguan Life ticks all the boxes because that's exactly what it does really well. It does have a great engine. It drives very comfortably. It's not going to set your heart on fire, but honestly, why are you looking at this segment if that's what you're looking for in the first place? And as far as I'm concerned, the Tiguan Life fits the bill. And that's a very Volkswagen thing to do, right? To perfectly, accurately fulfill requirements based on preset criteria defined by data and surveys. It's very Germanic. Now, if you do want a 7-seater SUV that does even better fuel economy, you can consider the Hyundai Santa Fe, which currently is not available for sale because they're about to update it. Or if you're willing to spend a little bit more money, you could get into something like a Kia Sorento, or alternatively, you could get another 5+2, which is the Peugeot 5008. That, notably, has a slightly larger engine and it's got a regular torque converter automatic, which means that progress in town is even smoother. And I know for a fact that car has very good fuel economy. But if you're looking for an SUV that does everything relatively well for really not that much money, particularly given the fact that you're being offered 5+2 seats or 5 seats in an enormous boot, then yes, the Volkswagen Tiguan Life is certainly something worth considering, although I suspect that 2 minutes in a Volkswagen showroom you'll end up putting a deposit on a Tiguan Elegance instead. But in any case, that has been our review of the 2023 Volkswagen Tiguan Life. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon to be notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care, stay safe and jangan bodoh.